Hello and welcome back to Respect the Drive. I'm Tedward, and today's guest, Nikhil Dhanani, not necessarily a household name. In fact, unless you're an insider, you wouldn't know who this is. But Nikhil has been, he's been involved in everything. He's currently the creative strategist for The Drive. You remember The Drive. And I get into that a little bit because we all know The Drive and those characters, that cast of characters from the shows that we had. Like, you know, Matt Farah got really big on Tuned, even though he was already kind of big in his own right. But you got to remember, this is where you get the Mike Mustos, the Larry Casillas. Even Chris Harris had a big kind of like, hey, here I am on The Drive. But he's always behind the scenes, and I really wanted to give him a voice and kind of get his perspective and his story, because this is a guy who works with everybody. If you walked into a press event and saw all of your favorite car reviewers, all of your favorite automotive personalities, you'd be starstruck by these guys, except they'd all be walking up to Nikhil because they all know him. He's a good guy. But how are you? I keep rewatching things. I don't like to watch things that are going to surprise me, which I know it's like that's the whole point of watching something is to see something new. But you know, I like that comfort food, especially at night before bed. So I watched Ocean's 11 last night because I thought this is something I've seen. I don't remember every detail and every twist and turn, but I remember it was fun. It was an enjoyable movie. It's from 2001. And I have a couple notes, but first and foremost, Don Cheadle's British accent is the most insane thing to make it to cinema in the world. How on earth did they greenlight that accent? It is awful. And there's no way Don Cheadle can watch that movie. There's no way he can look at that and say, man, I am proud of this performance. Anyway, then there's like awkward, like racist undertones. They're not even undertones. They're just straight up there for the contortionist, the Chinese guy in the film. But I digress. This is not an in-person interview. Nikhil is based out of New York, so we did this on FaceTime. And unfortunately, not at Garage 42, a beautiful new storage facility for your vehicles up in Woburn, Massachusetts, where my M5 currently sits. I actually just posted a couple photos on my Instagram visiting my M5 up there. But it's a great option if you do need to store your car either for the winter or just get it out of the garage. Maybe you and your wife, your husband, whatever, you're taking up 2 garage spaces with project cars or 2 garage spaces with your baby, and you realize, oh, I never drive this, and now we can never actually park our daily drivers in the garage, so they're always dirty, they're always snowy. Bring them up to Garage 42. But without further ado, here is Nikhil Dhanani.
How is it being at a car event? How does that, because I haven't been, we had a couple like small events in the area, but I haven't been to any yet because I don't feel right doing it.
I didn't like it. That was the only one I've been to. I've seen, there's people who are just comfortably going out and then doing these big packed shows in Boston. I see it all the time. People go out to, there's an area called the Ink Block, and it's like any Boston photos of a car. It's under a bridge. There's all this like graffiti style, like pop art.
Yeah.
And you know, it's the kind of place where like if me and you were going to go do a shoot, you were like, hey, Tom, I've got like a car for the drive that we're doing. Where should we go to do the B-roll and like the sexy, you know, like orbit shots? I'd be like, oh, go there. That's the spot.
Got it.
And they pack it though with like, you know, 50, 60 cars. I think, I don't know. I might be wrong there. There's people in Boston like, no, man, it only fits 35. I don't know. It looks like a lot. And then you have the groups who usually hold car shows there. They're on the social media screaming, being like, it wasn't us. This is not us. We are not holding this show. Because like nobody wants to be culpable for like the inevitable of like, oh, there's an outbreak and it's like all the car scene, you know?
Exactly.
So What are you doing at the Drive now? You're the creative strategist? Is that what's happening?
So I'm the creative strategist. I'm basically helping out with the social, and I've been doing the branding and design stuff, but my biggest thing is merch, right?
Yeah.
So all the blip ship collaborations I oversee, and I design the shirts themselves and all the graphics for that. So that's what I do. The Drive is a part-time thing I do. I'm all over the place, as you know, right? Like,
yeah, you're a man of many. You wear a lot of hats.
I wear a lot of hats.
Probably literally as well. You probably also actually wear hats.
I have like millions of hats. So
you're very.
I have a hat rack.
You're like painfully stylish, which is. We'll go back in time a little bit, but it is so funny when I was like, I remember meeting you and like being like, oh, where are you from? What do you do? And you like told me what you did, and I was like, it was at the time when Alex Roy was like really, really going deep into like the Polizei 144
Yes,
jackets and
yes.
patches and all that stuff. And then there's just this guy, who's like the assistant, but you're not like any assistant. You're like like incredibly qualified and appropriate. I was like, how did you find like I don't know
Like,
any company that finds people that are this correct for a job.
yeah. And that sort of just happened. So before I met Alex, right before that happened, I was a stylist at a Club Monaco, and for their VIP clients, I would be the one that picks out their outfits, and they would tell me an event, I would prep an outfit for them and put it together. So I went to school for fashion, right? And that was like my true interest growing up. It was fashion, and cars was just a hobby. It was something I enjoyed and I loved, but I'd never imagined working in the automotive industry
Well, and
ever.
at the time, I mean, what the
And
auto industry it wasn't like this crazy. It's become such a bizarrely lifestyle oriented thing, and it always
exactly.
was, but only for like a certain niche, only for like, oh, I have a Testarossa, so I dress like this. Like
Yes,
the
exactly.
Volkswagen people didn't necessarily have a style.
No, exactly. And so I okay, so I met Alex. I met Alex when I was at FIT. It was like my first. It was literally like my second week of my first semester at FIT, and I just graduated high school. I was a stylist studying fashion. I met Alex at a BMW of Manhattan Cars and Coffee. I had
Classic.
an E39. I had an E39. I had a 540. That was my first car. I love that car. But I was just there. I didn't know Alex was going to be there, and I was a huge Pulitzer fan. I was a fan of Alex. I was a fan of the drive. I knew all of this stuff before, and I was just watching this stuff on YouTube. So it was never a thing for me. It was never a thing I imagined that was like real life. It was always a degree away. So as I'm pulling into BMW Manhattan showroom, the first thing I see displayed there is 144A, and
And
I freaked out.
it's crazy when you see that car. I almost cried when I saw that car for the first
Yeah,
time. I was like, I can't believe
I
because this had this underground celebrity status that
it did.
it was so personal, and it was the kind of thing where you're like this isn't like, oh, I like Jake Gyllenhaal. It's like Alex Roy and just the stories surrounding the gumballs and cannonball and all this stuff. It was really intense for people like you and I, because this was what we followed. This was those were
Yeah,
like these bizarro role models that you'd explain, who is that guy to people.
exactly. And yeah, I mean, I right before, so I grew up watching The Drive because in my like I'm still young, right?
Yeah,
So
you're a
that
baby.
generation, that's what I had to look to. It was The Drive. I mean, growing up, as I was getting my license, all I watched was The Drive because I was getting into cars. I'm like, this is the coolest thing ever. I'm like, there's this whole world. But again, I was just a fan. So first thing I see when I pull into the dealership was 144A, and I'm with my father because my father would and I would always go to car coffees together. He's a big car guy too. So I go into the dealership, and that's the first thing I see, and I freak out. I tell my dad, I'm like, holy shit! I'm like, Alex Roy is here, and my dad's like, who the fuck's Alex Roy, right?
That
So
is every
I'm like,
dad's response to to
yeah,
like
exactly. Who the fuck is Alex Roy? So I mean, I explained it to him, and he was like, "Wow, that's pretty cool." And then all of a sudden, I see Alex like just by the bagel buffet, shoving a bagel with cream cheese in his mouth, and he was like cream cheese all over his face. It was like the funniest thing ever. So
And this
I'm
is
like,
the
I'm
morning.
gonna.
This is like early morning.
This
Like,
is like 7:30 a.m.
yeah,
Yeah,
like Alex probably never didn't sleep the night before. He's like literally just
no,
like
probably not.
continue.
And he was wearing the Pulitside jacket, and like it was like 60, 70 degrees out. I'm like, he has a leather jacket. Whatever. It's like he was in uniform. He was in Alex Roy uniform,
Doing the thing.
aviators and all stuff,
Yeah.
doing the thing. So I'm like, holy shit. I'm like, I have to go up to him. So I go up to him just to spark a conversation. And the first thing he asked me, he's like, oh, so what do you do? I'm like, I'm in college. I'm like, I'm studying fashion. He's like, oh, you're studying fashion. Awesome. He's like, I have the jacket line. And since there, we just started talking. And he's like, you should come by my loft next week and let's talk about what we could do with these jackets and brainstorm some ideas. And from there, I met up. I went to the apartment that next week, and I don't know. That was like our relationship. That's where it started, and then all these things grew out of that. And I mean, it was really, really surreal, and it still is.
He always has a knack for utilizing somebody either for something that he's like, oh, I actually need someone for that, or he's like, I know a guy who you'd be perfect to meet. I need to, like, how many times have you seen him meet a stranger and they talk for 5 minutes and he's giving them a phone number of somebody else? Like, you need to talk to this guy.
Always. I've gotten so many texts from random people. They're like, oh, Alex gave me your number. I'm like, oh, this is awesome. I mean, like, he's really, really good at connecting the dots with people.
It's incredible. And you actually were there like right when I met him for the first time, which is when I met you.
Correct.
Yeah. And you made me look like a friggin' cool guy. So I was there like literally as a +1, right? I was there with Dr. M3 because we had been in Manhattan for the Huracan Performante, like private unveiling pre-Geneva.
Yep.
Everyone,
I think Eli was there too.
Yeah, exactly. Ignition Tube. Yeah. So we were at Rob Ferretti's, we were at Gotham Dream Cars, and we were like hanging out, and I was like, hey, can you see if like he could hook us up with Alex? We're going to be in New York for a couple days. Cody asks, Rob's like immediately on the phone, like, hey, Alex, I've got Doctor here. And he's like, oh, I'd love to meet Doctor. I've been following him for years, blah, blah, blah. So we go there, we're hanging out, and I'm fanboying like hard because like not only am I meeting him, I'm not meeting him at like a show. I'm not meeting him at an event. I'm meeting him in his house, like in this house. And they had already been filming stuff. I had watched like the old 3207 video or movie. I shouldn't go the video, like, but like the original, the original Cannonball kind of movie they were going for. And I waited for that movie for, 5 years or whatever. And it finally came out and I'm watching it. All the footage of the planning is in this apartment. And then here I am in it. There's the bear. There's the gun. There's the stuff.
Exactly.
And the slats. It's just an unmistakable setting. You couldn't commit a murder and have like a photo and be like, where was that? You'd be like, no, that was definitely at the Cooper Square apartment. So like it's the place. And I remember hanging out there and trying to, like, when you're like trying to be cool, you're like, I want this person to like be like, oh, you're not a total loser. And then and it was kind of going okay. And then you walk in and you're like, oh, it's Tedward. And Alex's face just lit the fuck up. Like, oh, people know who you are.
I knew who you were because of E39 Source, right?
Which is so fucking weird that you knew that.
I know. Yeah, because I mean, again, I had an E39, so I'd follow all this stuff, and I was in the forums and stuff. So I saw I think it was like I don't even remember. It was like your intro video to E39 Source.
Ryan let me do like
around your car.
Exactly. Yeah. It was like in my my shitty driveway.
So I was like, this dude seems super cool, and he has E39, and I just followed you. And then from there, I saw the content you posted, and I just started watching it, which is so funny. And
like, I was not a recognizable figure. Like it was my least recognizable time probably. And the fact that you walked in, put 2 and 2 together that quickly, it was just amazing. And I think no joke, you were the first, I can vividly remember it. Like you're like the first person to recognize me in a place that I was just so like, funny. I can't believe that happened. But that's where you, I think, are such an interesting figurehead here because you're not a figurehead. All right, this is I'm telling, and you can like laugh this off humbly if you'd like, but like imagine you walk into a party and there's like all these A-list celebrities. You see like Jake Gyllenhaal, and I keep using him. Why do I keep using him? But I watched Ocean's 11 yesterday. Let's just use them. We've got George Clooney, we've got Matt Damon, we've got Don Cheadle. Yes. Right. So you walk in and you're totally starstruck by all these people because you want to meet them. But what you notice is that all of those people are walking over to this other guy who you don't recognize, and they're all talking to him. You're that guy. You're that guy who, like, everybody in the automotive industry, everybody in automotive media knows you. And you have helped everybody in whatever bizarro capacity here and there. And we'll get into that a little bit with JF's projects. But like that's why I really wanted to talk to you, because I'm just like, nobody talks to Nikhil and is like, oh, what's your next project? Because you're not the guy on camera usually. You have been a couple times, but like very rarely are you the person or
and it's even just me doing this. Like, I I don't necessarily put myself out there. That's not what I usually. I'm totally cool with being off camera, and like I prefer it that way actually. Um, so even me doing something like this, like I have to say, like it's a big step for me because it's just out of my comfort zone. It's so out of my comfort zone.
But at the end of the
But
day, you're talking to somebody, and I watch you do this. I mean, not like I see
yes,
you all the
exactly.
time, but like I feel
I don't know.
like.
It's just
Go ahead. Sorry, I'm just
it's just
excited.
no. It's just weird. I think I was just like I think I was just surrounded by all these great people who I always admired deep down, right? And like I've watched all these people, and I was introduced to so much in such a small period of time where I mean I wasn't necessarily overwhelmed with all of it. I was just like, okay, I'm like, this is what it is now. I'm like, I guess like these are the people that are around me. I'm like, I just have to get used to it. I'm like, you just you reach a point where you're like, all right, I have to stop like freaking out about this and just get over it. And these are normal people who I work with now.
Well, I can remember being at the apartment for the after party of the Secret Race, like screening. Like it wasn't a finished product, and I remember like being like so excited to be down there. And I mean, like you also are like a very accommodating person because I hate driving to New York because it's like my worst. Like I like being in New York.
Yeah.
I do not like coming in a car. I hate that unless like I know there's like some valet or things are already taken care of. And you always, and I know that sounds crazy, but like that's where my anxiety lies. I could literally drive I could be in LA and you're like, hey, can you get this car to me in New York? And I'd be like, sure. You're like, yeah, just park it. And I'm like, oh, like I'm cool with the whole drive. I just hate the parking. It sucks. So I remember going down there and being like, I'm early. I just don't want to be late for this thing. I want everything to be perfect. Everything got fucked because like the guy we were staying with in Brooklyn, like, or wherever the hell it was, he's like, oh, you can't get into my building right now. We couldn't park anywhere. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. And I remember calling you. And I didn't want to like ask for help because I'm like, I'm sure your day is a fucking psycho shit show right now. But I'm like, hey, I'm early. Like, what are you up to? And you're like, just come down to Classic Car Club Manhattan, which already was like, I knew you were going out on a limb for me because they were putting on a show for Audi.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's right. It was like the auto show time.
So New York.
It was the e-tron launch, I think.
It was like the worst timing for visitors. Like it was not a time. It's like, just park out front. So I did
exactly.
And they looked at me and they looked at you like, are you fucking like inviting people here? And you're like, it's cool. It's cool. I was like, thank you. But I always feel like when I walk into those places, like, hey, you are the one. You're not too cool for anything. Like I never feel like I'm in this position where I'm like, oh shit, like, I always just feel welcome when you're there. I feel like oh, thank God Nikhil is here because otherwise I might not know where to go or I'll look like an idiot or like, where do I sit? What do I do?
Yeah. I don't know, man. I mean, like, again, and I think it's just because like I am just a normal person, right? And I'm just always in these weird situations where I'm like around these crazy people all the time. And I'm like, I'm on the same boat as you are. I'm just going through this as time takes me. So I don't know. It's this weird situation where I'm like, just be cool. Like in my head, I'm always just like, just be like, that's all you could really do. I mean, just.
It's true. And I mean, just for context, like we went into that theater and I remember sitting down and I was with you and Mike Spinelli for most of the day, which also very comforting individual. He's like
the best.
Like he's the best. Spinelli is like one of my favorite people.
He's the warmest person. Like,
but I remember sitting down and it was like you, Spinelli, and a couple other people, and then like 2 or 3 rows behind us is like iced tea and cocoa.
Yeah.
And I was like, shut up. And then like it was really fun to watch all of the people that I'd be starstruck by in the automotive industry be starstruck by that.
By Ice-T. Ice-T was I remember freaking out when he walked into the theater. Because like we invited Ice-T, but no one really knew if he would come or not, right? I mean, because like JF shot him a text that day of, and he said he was coming, but like he was a little late in responding and all that stuff. So we were a little unsure, but then when he walked in, everyone was just like, holy fuck, he's actually here.
It was crazy. This is not a family show. This is no, it was so bizarre. And it's funny because ever since then, like I have like more interest in Ice-T because I'm just like, every time I hear an Ice-T story, it literally kills me.
Me too. Because like I didn't really follow much of his social media or anything before that, but meeting him that day, just like, this dude's the coolest thing ever. Like, just any sentence he says to me is just like the funniest thing in the world. And
It's
like
weird because
following
it's
him on
like,
Twitter is
I
just,
can't figure out why though, because I'm like, I'm not making fun of him, but the way he delivers things
I'm
is
not
pure comedy.
exactly.
It's pure comedy every
It's
time.
pure comedy. It's so funny.
Because
I know.
Mark Maron like a decade ago did this bit where he like was in Spain and he saw Ice-T in an aquarium, and
Yeah.
Ice-T's walking around this aquarium with his kids, and he's just like, well, we have to follow him. So he follows him just to listen to him. And he's like, Ice-T's like reading off of the little signs on the aquarium. And I'm like, I don't think I can do an Ice-T impression, but he's like, the sea anemone travels as a group. And he like, does like this whole thing. And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, I would totally, if there was a nature, like when National Geographic loses like the big voice actors, just get Ice-T. He'll do it all.
Exactly. Exactly. I remember when we were recording the narration for Apex, right? And Spinelli, JF, and Will Barber, who is Tangent Vector's producer. So they were in the studio together, and I know this story because Spinelli was telling me, and like we still talk about this to this day.
I
right?
already know the story
But,
you're telling, and I can't wait to hear it again.
Yeah. So Ice-T walks into the studio. Those three are just sitting there, and Spinelli's like, "It's a pleasure to meet you." And then Ice-T just goes, "It's always a treat when players meet." And I'm like, that is the most Ice-T thing ever.
I'm sure he's sick of it, but I say it to Spinelli every time I see him.
Oh, always. Spinelli, I always say that to Spinelli. Even today, I'm like, just randomly slack him. It's always a treat when players meet.
Not only that, but the context of calling Spinelli a playa is the funniest thing in the world to me, because like objectively he is, but he's also just like the nerdiest dude, like to be like, yo, that's
he had on in the photo. He had on like LL Bean duck boots.
Yes. Oh my god, it's so funny. And I don't know, but all right, tell me about like you got involved with the secret race like was it even before it was becoming the secret race, like because you had the worst job of everybody, because I think I remember you sent me a picture once and it was like boxes of tapes, like VHS tapes.
Exactly.
And I was like, what are those? You're like, this is all the raw footage of stuff that people shot over like a decade of US Express and Cannonball runs, like home video.
And exactly. So it was right after the lawsuit, the 3207 situation settled, right?
Yeah.
And that was finally coming to a close. So it was finally time to start working on the new version with JF. And we just had all this footage. We had the original, there was like a few different cuts from the previous film, and they will probably never see the light of day, right? But I had the job of sorting through the footage and just considering I was a fresh eye to all of this at the time. They thought it was best I do this because I didn't watch 3207 before, right? So, and I've just never seen this footage before, and all these guys were so tired of looking at this footage. They're like, we need fresh eyes on this. So I looked through the footage, and it was just my job to put through just organized clips of stuff I thought was cool for the movie and just cool for scenes, just B-roll and shots of the car. So it was just sorting through hours and hours and hours and hours of footage and just picking out my favorite scenes and what looks cool and all that stuff, right? And it was just so tedious because it was weeks, right?
How do you even? I mean, this isn't like. Were you transferring it onto hard drives and like going through it?
Yeah.
Or like, oh my god, and like you're just trying to like flag it in a way that's like, oh, this seems like relevant.
Yeah, exactly. And I would be like, and I would just like note them, like Alex drives and sunglasses look cool in sun or whatever, like stupid little things like that made it into the movie. But I mean, it was tedious. It was super, super.
So
super
it's interesting
tedious.
that you're saying this right now, because I'm like sitting. So I worked with two Cannonball attempts. One of them was a 26. What was it? 26:29 was the fastest time this team did. And I'm literally going through the footage now. And I have that. I have what you had basically, where you're like, oh my God, I'm staring at like literally 30 hours from one run, plus all the other crap that's like ancillary to this thing.
Yeah. and on top of that, it was, yeah, like all the original US Express footage. Like that's not necessarily Alex's run, but there were so many runs made, and there were so many videos of all these, like, and the footage was fucking insane. Like
Yeah,
it's like
what was it like to
OG.
look at that? Because I mean, first of all, I'm sure that just to begin with, looking at footage from these guys and listening to the dialogue, some of them are probably very clever, very funny. Some of it's probably just like, holy shit, you could say that in 1983.
Yeah, I mean, no, there was a lot of shit said that would just never fly today, and it's
No.
like it would just never ever. Um, but yeah, there was a lot of that. There was just a lot of there's a lot of like cursing. It was a lot of, it was just random stuff. Like it was just car talk, you know, like you're in a car together for this many hours, so you're gonna hear some shit. Like
Yeah, I definitely have, and the guys who I know they're dreading that I'm going to put this in, but there's a 100% chance this goes in my film. And it's them pissing in the car, like into these like pee
yeah,
bags, and then just like
yeah,
fucking
yeah, yeah.
grenading them out the window. It's
Exactly,
like
exactly. There's a
I
lot of stuff like that
It's
out
so
there.
funny. And I'm like, oh, littering's terrible, but this is great footage.
Yeah, it's amazing footage.
So,
So true.
so it goes from that. You like, do you are you just like handing that off to JF or his like production crew? Like, how is that working?
Yeah, so I sorted all of that onto hard drives and I just handed it over to JF and the production crew, and we sat down together and narrowed it down further from there. And just like really, really, we spent like months going through footage and narrowing it down into smaller bits.
How,
Um,
like, I
but
think about that all the time because like you look at like how much like good juicy stuff goes into these events, and then
yeah,
JF is like, oh yeah, you need like a 90-minute film.
yeah,
Like,
exactly.
holy shit, that's so hard to cut that to 90 minutes, tell a story, and
It was
show the highlights.
so hard. I know, and still make it exciting. Like, I mean, it's a real challenge because like with Apex, we had to be 90 minutes because we were trying to get that TV slot right, and like the NBC Sports and stuff, like that's a 90-minute block on TV, so it has to fit within that timestamp.
So that's another part
And
of this that I don't think a lot of people realize is that like all right, so the drive, obviously the drive has gone through its own like ups and downs and all this crazy stuff. We'll talk about where it is now, but like they have, the drive on NBC Sports. There's the
yep,
YouTube channel, which is where most people know the drive from. The website, which is like an automotive news type site.
yep,
And then you guys just have all these crazy associations where you're involved. Like you guys are working with Blip Shift. You are kind of how you are housed in Classic Car Club Manhattan. Like you have all. It's such a crazy thing. So, like, first, what is the drive right now? Like, what if you can sum up the drive without just like naming like all of these crazy outlets? Like, there's still not. It's still a relatively small like organization.
it is, it is. And the Drive is, I mean, it's an automotive media company. It's like Complex, right? How Complex is for streetwear. That's what the Drive is for automotive. So there's so many different categories of it where it's more than just a publication. I mean, it really is a proper media company where, there's content, there's merch, there's products, there's branding, there's collaborations. It's a real brand. I
I
think the Drive is a brand more than anything else.
I think that's the hardest thing for even me to wrap my head around sometimes is because as far as I'm concerned, like the drive came and went. Like with YouTube, like YouTube was what I thought the drive was, and because I
Yes.
know you and because I know these people, I'm like I'm fully aware that that is not the beginning and end of the drive. But like, what would you tell someone who like was an avid drive follower, like via YouTube, like hey, we're still around and we're like like you guys have like a huge footprint as far as like
We
the it,
we
it
do. We
when you
do.
when you tell me the numbers, I'm like, how is that real? Like, like I don't.
Our our editorial, and we have like, I love our editorial team. I think like our editorial team is awesome. So it's just, I don't think people realize that the amount of editorial content we push out on the site and how many articles we have going out every single day. Um, that alone, I mean, yeah, the scale of our editorial department that's where most of our efforts go, right? Into the articles. And more so than video now, but I mean, it's so much stronger. The Drive is stronger than it ever has been. And people don't realize that. It's just because we're not out there pushing YouTube videos now, it
Right.
doesn't mean we're gone forever.
So
Yeah,
I
I mean,
still do
it's just
see,
something else.
yeah, I still do see some YouTube content. Like, what's this? I mean, you are the creative strategist. What is the creative strategy there? Like, it seems to be like peppered. Like, it's once in a while I see something, I'm like, whoa, they like really put some like that electric BMW.
The E30,
That was
yeah.
so cool. I was like, oh, this is a great video, and I'm like, I could tell that I knew I could tell by who was literally in your office. I'm like, oh my god, you guys like lost your entire office for like 3 days of filming or something, because it looked like,
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I was like, because I'm like, oh, I know Nikhil's there. I know those other two guys are there. I know they're probably being like calling back to other people saying like, did we get the shots we needed? Like, here's the list, blah blah
Yeah,
blah.
yeah, yeah. That was so the E30 Tesla shoot was an interesting one because it was actually, you're right, it was me, Aaron, and Jared. And we drove out there in the morning. So that shoot was something we were trying to do for a while. It got pushed back for weather and last minute rescheduling. So it was like it took a few months to actually lock down a date for that shoot. And I remember it was actually exactly a year ago. We it was like trying to we were trying to get as much as we can within a day. And when I say that, I mean as many locations, as many
I was blown.
drone shots. It
Dude,
was
no joke. As a viewer, as someone who like makes shit all the time, I was like, "Oh my god, you guys like really did this!" Like, I watched the follow
yeah,
shots,
yeah,
the drone
yeah,
shots on the coast, the shots in the garage, all the mic setups to get him talking. First of all, then trying to get a guy to talk on camera is tough because it's not like it's an actor. You're not like, "Hey, Mike, can you just come quickly do this intro?" It's like, dude, that
yeah.
takes fucking forever to get a stranger to tell you the thing.
Yeah, and luckily John was amazing. He killed it. He's such a good character. Like, so because he's with something like that, with a story like that, it's a little tough to do it yourself or have someone host it because it's it goes into so much detail, and I think only the person who knows the car and like the only person who knows the car is him. It's just he's the only person that could probably talk about that car because if you look at the wiring diagrams and all the work done to it,
Incredible.
it goes so in depth. And if you follow him on Instagram, like you'll see all the stuff he posts. And I mean, the dude's a mad scientist.
Well, did you guys just have to trust that, all right,
Yeah,
I mean, that's the thing. Like, you're going into this, it's like if I'm filming a Ford Explorer, I know the questions to ask. I know what I'm looking at. I know what needs to fill the time. When you're trying to film something that's like this legitimate, like laboratory Frankenstein thing, you're like, yeah, I know, like high level, it's an electric E30, but like that, there's so much more. And you kind of, now you have like this YouTube base who watches Engineering Explained, and you're like, they're gonna want more. And you have to kind of trust this guy to tell you things and be like, oh, I guess show me where that is on the car so I can film it.
exactly. And I think it was, so again, like I said, we've been trying to get this locked down for a few months. I remember how I first saw the car was on Instagram. I was just scrolling through Instagram one night and I saw it on my Explorer page or whatever. And I'm like, holy shit. And I realized that he had like no following. And I'm like,
you're like, this makes no sense. We need to change that.
this makes no sense. I'm like, this is really, really, really cool. And like, there's a video of him like dropping his daughter off to school and she's in the car seat in the back and he's just like flooring it. And this like Tesla swapped E30. I'm like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. So I just DM'd him on Instagram, like, dude, we have to talk. I would love to do a story or something on this. And it started off as like a back and forth Instagram DM thing. And eventually, like, it all starts with the Google Doc. I made a Google Doc. I invited him on the doc and we just shared some notes and bounced ideas off each other for a few weeks. And hopped on calls and I just got as much information from him as I could have. And then it just started, like, it all made sense. And it's just a matter of narrowing it down and what we want to include in the film and stuff. So,
isn't
and
that
sending
just
it to him.
so much effort? Like, it's so funny. People don't recognize the effort because I don't remember how long that was. It might have been like a 12-minute film or something.
Yeah.
Like,
it was around 10 minutes, 12 minutes.
Yeah, like that is so much effort, and like
It was months. Yeah.
you'll never get paid back for that. Like it's like impossible. And that's where I remember I was listening to like Chris Harris and JF on Collecting Cars, and they were just talking about the landscape of YouTube and how it's insane that they got to do what they do. Like that can't happen.
You could never. Yeah. Now it's crazy because I mean, hence why we only did one of those Tesla videos,
That's
right?
what
I
I was
mean,
wondering. I'm like, are we doing like
yeah,
when I saw that, I'm like, holy shit, this is a big production with a small team, like a small team.
exactly. That's exactly what it was. And it's just, it doesn't make sense putting resources to something like that because you're never going to get it back, right? I mean, it's just a forward facing product. It looks cool, it's good for the brand, but you can't do that on a consistent basis.
No.
And even like, I mean, we have almost 2 million followers on YouTube, but it's just, even then, it's tough, man. Unless you're consistent with it and doing it every day, and it's tough. I mean,
YouTube is an everyday, every 3-4 day thing, and if you're not on that,
it is.
and if you're, and that's the other thing is like the biggest, almost the worst thing you can do, is make something incredible and realize you're like, fuck me, I can't do that every month, I can't do that every week, I can't do that
Yeah.
every other day. Like that's why
Yeah.
I've gone from doing like multicam productions on every single car I drive to like I put a GoPro on a hat and I drive a car as fast as I fucking
Yeah.
can and as safely as I can and I talk about it and it gets more views
Yeah.
because and it has to. It's the only way to do this.
And then there's also the added element of being in Manhattan all
Oh my God,
day
you
long.
guys
It's
are
just,
totally screwed. Like, there's only
yeah,
so many B-roll shots you can do over a bridge with like, a supercar. It's like, yeah, great.
exactly.
Like, oh, you're flexing hard. Congrats. Like,
And if we like the closest nice roads we have, it's like an hour and a half at least. So just like from a logistical standpoint, it's such a mess trying to do content like that from New York and with everything involved. I mean, it doesn't make the most sense. But again, things are different now. Like our editorial is stronger than ever. We're pushing out more content. Our quality for on that side has just gone up. And I mean, yeah, that's really where most of our force is now in editorial.
and so that's your part-time thing. What else do you do? Like, it's so funny because like I said, you're like this dude who's like everywhere
I
all the time. I don't
yeah,
understand your life. And it's one of those times when it's like when someone says like, yeah, you've really got to diversify and do this. And I'm like, what does that mean? Like,
yeah. The thing I'm working on most right now, so is my company 24 Helps, and that's something I'm co-founder of. It's a wellness platform.
and that was originally
Um,
COVID calm, right?
it was originally COVID calm, so we launched it March 21st, which is like first week of quarantine in New York. And because my partner and I were just so bored at home, and we were like, we need something to do because everything slowed down, and I just can't slow down. Like
No.
I just can't sit around and like, what am I doing at home all day? Like I have to do something. So that was something for me to keep busy during the quarantine. And it was what it is COVID is a way for people to escape their current situations and have this resource to look forward to where it helped them better themselves and grow themselves while they were stuck at home. So we offered free meditation, free yoga, free breath work, all that stuff. Cause I am into wellness and I am into all of that stuff as well, but that's a personal thing. I don't really talk about that stuff too much. Now I do.
Yeah, but
But
I mean, that's the thing is there is a point, whether that's like your lifestyle or not, but there's a point when anybody, especially someone like you who was under the gun with probably deadlines and like this fucking thing needs to get done or everything comes
mhm,
crashing down. Like if you're doing 3 things for, JF and 3 things for Alex, those all have to get done. Or it's like, oh,
exactly.
you're not shipping the jackets. Like you just fucked over all these customers. Oh, you didn't get me my
Yeah,
footage.
yeah,
Guess what?
yeah.
You just set back production 2 weeks. It's like there's a lot of actual
Yeah,
pressure on you, and you do need to kind of find a way to separate from that after dark and like
for sure, for
walk
sure.
or in the
And
morning.
decompress. Yeah.
Yeah,
And so I love music therapy and I love listening to music. So hi-fi, which is another like passion or hobby of mine,
we
which
didn't even say NoHo sound. We'll get there.
that's a whole other thing, right? I mean, there's just so much. So I mean, every night I have really nice headphones at home that I use, and every night before bed I listen to music for like an hour or two just to wind down from the day. That's my nightly routine. And I need that. I need that break. I need that like little period of whether I'm doing meditation or listening to music and all that stuff. Um, but that's exactly what this is, and we're offering that on a larger scale for people and offering this as a resource. And I think people needed it more at that time than ever. So that snowballed into something much larger. It became a real community. We just partnered with NYU 3 weeks ago, which
That's
is
incredible.
insane. so surreal. We did like, yeah, we had a 900 person event 2 weeks ago,
What?
and it was insane. Yeah, that's something that snowballed and something bigger than I
I
ever
hate
imagined.
there's a all right, so I as much as I like love you and I'm always wishing the best for you, there's sometimes when like you do things that I'm just like, how the fuck did that happen? And then when you're just like, it just
I
happened, I'm like, that's not good enough. Tell me more. Everyone
I don't know. I mean,
wants
I say that, but like I myself, I'm like, I find this hard to believe. I find like we're listed on NYU as a resource for their newly graduates. So I'm like,
Yeah.
how does this make any sense? But I reached out to for 24 when I launched it. I reached out to everybody I know, and I'm like, can you like? I'm like, it wasn't favorites. So I'm like, do you know anyone that could help me with this? Do you know anyone that could help me with this? Or do you know anybody that could connect me with someone who does this? And I asked around, and I got people.
Well,
And
how can people find that right now? Like if someone was like, "Oh, what the hell is that?" Like where do they go?
24helps.com and 24
24helps.com.
helps on Instagram as well. Yeah.
Got it. I'm not above a shameless plug. I'll do it for you.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I didn't, yeah. I mean, um, yeah, so I have that going on. That's been taking up most of my time now, honestly. And because it's just so big. And we have an event tomorrow morning too that I have to prep for. It's a meditation, Saturday morning meditation. So stuff like that keeps me busy. Um, I do that. NoHo Sound, I'm the creative director for, which I run all the marketing and events
How many
and
fucking
organizing the events
W-2s
for
do you
that.
receive? Like your
All
taxes must be
all the W2s.
who is your fucking accountant, man?
All the W2s. Yes.
You're
Just
like,
all of them.
you're like, shit, I earned $40 last year from this one.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So NoHo Sound, I'm doing the events for, so whether it's digital now, but I put together experiences and events for people. And that is hospitality is one of my favorite things, man.
You're good at it.
I,
You make
I,
people feel like they belong, and you make people feel like you're the guest, like you're one of their favorite guests. Like when anybody walks in, or at the time, I know the apartment's gone, which is very bizarre. But like NoHo Sound was in Alex's apartment, and now it's somewhere
yeah,
else. Is it still in NoHo?
it's Tribeca.
Okay,
So it's like 15 minutes away,
sure,
but
good enough. That's all right.
yeah, yeah, good enough. It's still downtown. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. Hospitality is something I was never into it before NoHo Sound. With NoHo Sound, I was sort of forced to be in these environments where we had 50 people at the event at the apartment every single night. So just being forced to be in these social situations, I've always, and I still am. I am such an introvert, but just being forced in these situations and forced to be out of my comfort zone really helped me. And I learned how much I love just catering to people. Like I love hospitality. I love putting together an experience where people could remember and take home with them for the rest of their life.
Who are your
That to me is like,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry.
Who are your favorite? I mean, you guys have hosted a lot of different artists because, like, I don't know if people know this. I
Yes.
mean, NoHo Sound, not only are you guys doing like crazy high end audio stuff like Macintosh and all these bananas things, like, it's frustrating because, like, I go in there, I'm like, I don't know what I'm looking at. I just know I'm not touching anything because I'm like terrified of it. I'm like, this is way too expensive. And you're like, no, just press the button. I'm like, you press the button. I'm not pressing the button. and, like, and which is funny because I have no problem like getting behind the wheel and like flogging $1 million car. But like, I see this audio
Yeah.
shit and I'm just like, I feel like my dad's about to yell at me. Like don't touch
Yeah.
that.
Don't touch that.
Don't touch that. But
And,
like, so who
and
you,
I think,
oh, go ahead. Sorry.
no, sorry.
I was just gonna say, who are like your favorite artists, like who've come through? Because you guys have had some pretty intense people come in.
We've had some pretty intense people. One of my favorite audience, it wasn't even a concert, it was just a comedy night. It was Mark Normand, who is pretty big now, but seeing him in person was really cool and hosting. Aparna Nalcherna is also another comedian who was on.
Who knew her? How did that happen?
It was so we work with this event organizer Out by 10, Susan, and she knows all these people from just being in the industry for years and years and years. And she's always like, "Hey, I feel like this person would be really good, and like they would love to do an intimate show." I'm like, "Cool, who is it?" And she'd be like, "It's Mark Norman." I'm like, "What?" I'm like, "How does that make sense?" So that was awesome. I love the comedy stuff, man. Like big comedy fan. So the comedy nights are always one of my favorites. I'm always
It's just one of those things where I always wish, like, man, I wish I was closer. Because if I had lived in New York, I totally would have been like, I will be the skinny little bodyguard if you need me to be. I'll hang out and help out. Like I'll do.
yeah, and I mean that's the whole goal with NoHo Sound, right? It's to again, I think you summed it up perfectly. You always feel like your dad would yell at you if you press the hi-fi button, right? And
Exactly.
the whole point of NoHo Sound is to not make people feel that way about hi-fi, because that's the general image that hi-fi gets. It's all these old New York hi-fi shops. It's like a 70-year-old dude behind the counter who's just going to yell at you the second you walk in and make you feel super unwelcomed. But I mean, no, we're trying to make hi-fi accessible. You have people spending like $30,000 on watches and people buying all these cars, but people don't even know like these speakers exist. And the second they hear it and experience that, they're like, I need this.
Every time I listen to Tame Impala, like that second album, because that was Alex would always play. I forget the name of the song, but he'd always play that song.
Let It Happen.
Let It Happen was the song where he's like, you gotta experience this because it's a little gritty, and you hear all of the texture of that album through the speakers.
Exactly, and like cars, like you have so many niches within that world where you have like the guys who are into tube amps, and you have the guys who are into like preamp, all this stuff. It's really, there's so many deep holes to go into with hi-fi, and I think the more you're into it, you're never satisfied. In hi-fi, you're just never satisfied. You always want a bigger and better system.
Well, the thing I come away with is that like you're just like, oh, so there are actually no good car audio systems.
Yes.
Like, you're like,
yeah, no, for sure.
You like
they all suck.
They all put the name, and they all just like license the name, and they're like, yeah, sure, like you're Bowers and Wilkins, you're a Bose, you're this, you're that, and it's like, oh, dude, no, you have no idea what you're talking about. This does not sound good.
Yeah, I have Bang & Olufsen in my Audi, and I hate, like, it sounds like tin cans to me because I'm just so used to what this sounds like, and I'm like, I don't know. And people are like paying so much for this upgraded audio system from the dealerships. I'm like, such a ripoff.
Dude, it's crazy. And it's like, and sometimes they do it like, I mean, the Volkswagen ones where they're like, oh, it's Fender. I'm like, who's
exactly.
Out? Like, come
Fender.
on, dude. Like,
I have to say though, I do enjoy Meridian and the Range Rovers. I do feel like that's one of the better in-car audio systems.
Yeah, I mean, they exist.
Any new Range Rover is amazing.
It's just so hard. It's also just like the worst possible way to put sound into a person. It's like a car.
It is. Yeah, I mean, the whole shape it's so like with the hi-fi system, right? I mean, you have your two speakers in front of you, and you're spaced out at X amount of distance. It's an equilateral triangle of where you're seated. There's so much that goes into it. And with the car, it's just hard to have like the surround.
You can't do it, and you have to try to.
You can't.
You have to, because then what you do is you compensate by balancing it and just like blowing out, like, oh, just make the right side louder,
or like making the low end heavy and adding bass. Like people always think more bass, better the quality for some reason. That's such a thing, but
it is not good. But yeah, no, I've like having listened to some of those systems and stuff. It like ruined car audio for me. I was like,
it really does.
God.
Man. I hate listening to music in the car, and I hate that I hate it because like I really want to listen to music in the car, but like I can't enjoy it. It really spoils you. It's so hard to like. It's just like even listening to music on my AirPods in my commute every day. It's just. I do it, but it's just white noise.
Exactly. Well, what are you working on next? Like, what's coming up? Do you have any projects with the Drive people? Do you have projects with like? I mean, JF's always got something going on, and I'm sure you're one of the hands that he likes to have on deck.
Yes, for sure. Working on a couple projects with that, and so with the Drive, we're actually building out our own e-commerce store, which is going to be really exciting. Having like its own website and offering all sorts of products. So I'm reaching out to some cool brands for collaborations on that. But my biggest focus right now, and what I'm pushing the most right now, is really 24helps.com. That's
awesome.
my shameless plug for this.
No,
that's
do it.
Be it.
That's great. Yeah. No, I mean, I'm so proud of you for like chasing your own thing too, because it's so, all right. So here's the deal. every until I met you, every like let's say assistant or manager or anybody who worked with like a person who had some any moniker of fame. Is that the word moniker? Monicum? Moniker? I don't know. I shouldn't use words I don't
Yeah.
understand. But like they always kind of acted like the gatekeeper, as if like they were the success of their boss, right? They're
Yeah.
like it would be like, oh, I'm working for this guy. Let's say Jake Gyllenhaal again, right? I'm working for Jake Gyllenhaal. Like I'm as good as him because you don't get to talk to him until you talk to me, and I think that's one of the things that you're so good at the time when you were starting out was because you really were like Alex's right-hand man, and no one ever felt like you were the gatekeeper. You were part of the team.
Yeah.
You were like really part of that team. And that's so unique. That's not a thing that
Yeah.
happens.
And I think like Alex and my relationship, I mean, Alex is family to me. Like Alex is my parents, and like I mean, he really is like a family member to me. So
Yeah.
I think just we've always had that energy with each other, so it always just felt natural, and there was never like this weird feeling with that at all. Like
Well, I
it was
mean,
awesome. Like I
like
love Alex to death. Yeah.
it is one of those things where like it's not someone that you're just walking into an office every day and he's like, okay, get me the thing. It's like you're going to his
Yeah.
home. Like you're in his home.
Yeah. No,
You
he
live
would come out
there.
in like his bathrobe. Yeah.
You basically
Literally.
live there. And then like you get to a point where like not so long ago it goes from that to, oh, and here's my baby for a little while.
The Coco. Yeah. I mean, I would take like I don't know. I was around Coco. I was like Coco's second dad essentially.
Exactly. No, it's
It's
great.
like
And I mean,
yeah.
I don't know I'm sure you get enough praise, but I do want to say like you should be so proud of the involvement you've had in so many projects that like nobody even knows you're a part of. And just know that
Yeah.
there are people like me out there who are going, "Oh my God, I need to hear Nikhil's story behind this."
I appreciate that. I really appreciate like you asking me to be on this, man. Again like I still watch your YouTube channel like all the time, man. Like I mean the X7 video, I'm like yes, I'm like I need more video. So just being like just knowing you, dude, is awesome. Like I'm a big fan of you. So
I appreciate it. It's been,
yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. It's like people like you have also taught me to just keep doing the thing, because not everything takes a day. Not everything takes a year. Sometimes
No,
it takes a long
exactly.
burn to like find your thing and get to the place where it's like, oh, this is going to work. It's incredible how much effort goes into certain things. And sometimes we forget it's not just the people who are on the camera.
Yeah,
And
for sure.
And let's see do you have any good Chris Harris stories? I'm kidding. But like, that's what I mean. It's like, you would be in the entourage, you're the guy, you're in there, you're part of that
Yeah,
crew.
and I love the fact that I'm low key about that. Like again, I have no interest in putting my face out there. I really could care less about that stuff, right? So I'm like, this is the best way I get to experience this stuff because I really do want to experience this life, but I don't have to put myself out there. I don't have to put my face out there.
There you go. What do you think the next generation, or like, what is the next step in automotive media look like? Because we've gone through the hyper like stylized insanity that the Drive was doing back in the day when there was like serious funding. We've gone through we're kind of still on the tail. I think we're on the tail end of it, but like, please God, let us be on the tail end of like just obnoxious vloggers. I don't know that I can do it anymore.
So exactly. And what I think is going to happen is what I really see happening is I think people's expectations after all of this year is it's going to be people don't want to see the flashy shit anymore. I've realized, and I've learned this a lot with even fashion and just general, like I'm always observing what people are interested in. Like I went to school for fashion forecasting. So just, I love paying attention to trends and all that stuff. I think things are going to be a lot simpler from a production standpoint. I think this is why people like Doug DeMuro I mean,
great example. He is as low budget as they come, man.
I think you're going to see a lot more of that. And I think you're going to continue to see a lot more of that. I think people just relate to that on a different level. People don't want to see the edited videos or like the vlogs with, like that are just cut up. And I don't know. There's this like the one shot video is just going to be, I think that's going to be so much more prevalent.
It's so funny because it's like, Matt Farah has been doing that for so long with one takes.
Yeah,
And yet it's like, oh shit, that's actually what people want. Like,
it is. It's exactly what people want. And I think, yeah, I mean, you look at like the smoking time, even on the podcast, like the comments, it's just people asking for more one takes all the
well,
time.
it's
I see more and more of that stuff.
well, I mean, it's car porn in the most literal sense. It's like sometimes people just get into it. Like, I didn't come here to get
Yeah,
warmed up. Like, don't give me the friggin' 50 seconds of B-roll and drone shots. I know. Show me the car. And like, that's what we do now.
exactly. Just get straight to it. Yeah. And like even your videos, I think like the POV driving stuff, that stuff is awesome. Like I think you're going to see a lot more people doing that stuff.
I'm hoping that like that's what me and Chris Amos, the Topher, have been talking about a lot, because we're just like, you know what, I think this is like what it's going to be. I think this is how we got to do it, and I think the same goes for you guys. I mean, whether it's YouTube on the drive, I don't know what that will evolve
Yeah.
into.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know what it'll evolve into either, but like, you know, even the articles, it's like get me there and don't copy paste specs. Don't copy paste.
Yeah. Cut the fluff. Like
Let's
cut
just
the
get
fluff.
it. Like, is it good or
Yeah.
bad? Don't make me like wait for it, you know, just like get there. But man,
Exactly.
I'm so glad you came on. Like, I would like to have you back, because I know you have a bajillion stories, and we could probably like focus in
For
and have like a
sure.
panel of like just crazy people. And you know what I mean?
I would
Like,
love to. Yeah.
I just love it.
Let's definitely do it. This is awesome, dude. Thank you so much for having me. I mean,
Thank
like,
you for
yeah,
coming.
I really appreciate it.
Isn't he just the coolest? You know, behind a lot of the big productions and figureheads that you like in the automotive community, there's a whole team behind them, and Nikhil's one of those people. And I love hearing the stories from those folks, because they tend to be kind of unfiltered. But you know, nobody has really watched more Cannonball footage than Nikhil Dhanani. I think maybe JF and his editors are either above or equal to, but to say that you've seen more than he has, I mean, God, you should see the amount of footage that guy went through. But thank you so much for listening. Special thank you to my Patreon supporters, patreon.com/TedwardDrives, the folks who have donated, whether it's $1, $10, $15 a month. You are making this content possible. And don't forget to respect the drive. We'll see you in the next one.